Now moving on to the installation, I've only ever installed an aftermarket GPU cooler once, and this was one of Actic's own air coolers, the Accelero Extreme IV or 4. Now back to this cooler, the installation in general was pretty damn easy compared to, say, the Extreme 4, which had a lot of steps, and yeah, there was potential for a lot of error and even some risk. Now, intentionally not going into much detail, the first thing you've got to do is to remove your existing graphics card cooler by removing all the screws on the back and also some from the side of your card if needed. Now just note, when taking off the cooler for your card, you shouldn't need to remove any of the screws on the front, as these screws should remove the housing so you can gain access to clean your fans. Now you may also need to remove, say, 2 or 3 screws from the side where, say, your video out ports are. Now once you've done this, you'll want to apply some thermal paste to the GPU core once you remove the existing stuff, and yeah, you'll only need a small amount compared to the amount that you usually spread on a CPU. Now next you'll want to screw in the backside heatsink and also the pump unit to the card at the same time with the screws, washers and also springs included with the product. Now this can be a little bit tricky and was even more tricky for me to film this. However, once you've done this, you want to mount the smaller VRM heatsink. Now my card is not a reference NVIDIA card, but an MSI Twin Frozen variant of the GTX 770. So in my case, unfortunately, there's no possible way for me to mount the VRMs that did come pre-cut in this kit. However, what I did do is put the metal heatsink back onto the card that MSI did, actually fit onto the card, which is intended to cool the VRMs and RAM chips. Was a shame about that, but that's kind of how it's going to be if you do have a card that isn't a reference card, which, to be honest, should be the majority of you out there. Now after this, the last thing to do is to screw the radiator and fan onto the back or the front of your case, now which in my case is kind of a step that I can skip, as you can't say I use a normal kind of computer case, and since I'm using a test bench, I did just blue tack the radiator onto my desk to keep it secure. Now by default, the fan on the radiator is set to blow air out of the case, and this naturally does make sense as by doing this, typically case temperature will be lower, but may impact performance of the GPU a little bit. But typically, as this cooler is going to nearly half your GPU's operating temperature, you can definitely see why Actic went with this route.